Hello and welcome. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran. It's 6 p.m. in New Delhi, 7:30 in the morning in Washington, D.C. and 8:30 in the evening in Beijing. And you're watching World Today on DD India. Now, over the next 1 hour, we will take a deep dive into the optics and outcomes of the virtual summit between the presidents of China and the U.S. It was their maiden meeting. The two had only spoken on the phone so far. Now, we'll also get you the latest on the migrant crisis brewing at the border between Belarus and the European Union. But first, here are the headlines we are tracking at this hour. U.S. President Joe Biden holds a virtual summit with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping. The U.S. opposes China's unilateral effort to change Taiwan. Xi says the two sides must increase communication and cooperation to solve common challenges. European Union to step up sanctions against Belarus in response to an escalating migrant crisis on the border with Poland. It will be the fifth round of EU sanctions on Belarus after a disputed presidential election and crackdown on dissidents. 6 teens injured in a drive-by shooting in the U.S. The victims, who were between 14 and 18 years of age, were students at a school in the town of Aurora in the state of Colorado. Authorities searching for multiple suspects in an attack which investigators believe may have been gang-related. And after an ICC T20 World Cup loss against New Zealand, India set to face the Kiwis again in the shortest format of the game in a series beginning in India tomorrow. First match to be played at Jaipur. And in tennis, Novak Djokovic receives the year-end ATP Tour #1 ranking trophy for a record 7th time after starting his ATP Finals campaign in Turin with a win. All right, then let's get started. First up, the big news. Now, U.S. President Joe Biden and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping traded strong warnings on the future of Taiwan at a virtual summit meant to establish what Biden calls guardrails against a conflict between their countries. The maiden Xi-Biden summit lasted longer than expected, 3.5 hours to be precise. While the goal was to settle an increasingly volatile relationship between the economic and geopolitical competitors, tension over Taiwan loomed large over the talks. The Chinese state media reported after the summit that Xi cautioned Biden that encouraging Taiwanese independence would be quote-unquote playing with fire. The White House readout after the summit was more measured, but reading between the lines, Biden's pushback against Beijing's aggressive posture toward Taiwan was evident.
Leaders of two global superpowers finally held a virtual summit on Tuesday morning. The much-awaited meeting of the leaders of the world's biggest economies took place via video conference. A number of issues were on the table, from trade to Taiwan, to human rights, to climate change, to escalating military tension. The two leaders discussed the complex nature of relations between the two countries and the importance of managing competition responsibly. President Biden underscored that the United States will continue to stand up for its interests and values, and together with its allies and partners, ensure the rules of the road for the 21st century advance an international system that is free, open, and fair. He emphasized the priority he places on far-reaching investments at home as his country aligns with allies and partners abroad to take on the challenges of our time. President Biden raised concerns about the PRC's practices in Xinjiang, Tibet, and Hong Kong, as well as human rights more broadly. He was clear about the need to protect American workers and industries from the PRC's unfair trade and economic practices. He also discussed the importance of a free and open Indo-Pacific and communicated the continued determination of the United States to uphold its commitments in the region. President Biden reiterated the importance of freedom of navigation and safe overflight to the region's prosperity. On Taiwan, President Biden underscored that the United States remains committed to the One China policy guided by Taiwan's Relations Act, the 3 joint communiques, and the 6 assurances that the United States strongly opposes unilateral efforts to change the status quo or undermine peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. Biden said that the 2 leaders must make sure their relations do not veer into open conflict, including by installing common-sense guardrails.
As I've said before, it seems to me our responsibility as leaders of China and the United States is to ensure that the competition between our countries does not veer into conflict, whether intended or unintended. Just simple, straightforward competition.
U.S. President Joe Biden told Chinese leader Xi Jinping that he hoped to have a candid conversation about human rights and security issues.
It seems to me we need to establish some common sense guardrails to be clear and honest where we disagree and work together where our interests intersect, especially on vital global issues like climate change. None of this is a favor to either of our countries, what we do for one another, but it's just responsible world leadership, and you're a major world leader, and so is the United States. How our bilateral relationship evolves seems to me will have a profound impact not only on our countries, but quite frankly, the rest of the world. We have a responsibility to the world as well as to our people. It's why we believe, and you and I have talked about this, all countries have to play by the same rules of the road, why the United States is always going to stand up for our interests and values and those of our allies and partners.
The U.S. President also told his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping that the U.S. is strongly opposed to unilateral efforts to change the status quo or undermine peace process across Taiwan. Xi said that 2 sides must increase communication and cooperation to solve the many challenges they face.
A sound and steady China-US relationship is required for advancing our 2 countries' respective development and for safeguarding a peaceful and a stable international environment, including finding effective responses to global challenges such as climate change, which you referenced, and the COVID pandemic. China and the United States should respect each other, coexist in peace, and pursue win-win cooperation.
The talks, which were initiated by Biden, were intended to set terms for the future U.S.-China competition. Biden is expected to press Beijing to honor international rules on commerce and security issues. The United States and China, the world's biggest economies, disagree on the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic, trade and competition rules, Beijing's expanded nuclear arsenal, and its stepped-up pressure on Taiwan, among other issues. World Today Desk, DD India.
Right, joining me now is Professor Swaran Singh from the Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Professor Singh, welcome to World Today. Now, before we come to the optics and outcomes from the Xi-Biden summit, I want to ask you straight up, what were Biden and Xi hoping to achieve with these talks?
I think very clearly, Ramesh, it has a direct message to their domestic audience, as also their respective friends and allies, in particular U.S. friends and allies. And the meeting was on request of President Joe Biden. And as we know, President Joe Biden has been having difficulties at home with rising inflation, with the pandemic raging, and of course this recent, this sudden precipitous withdrawal from Afghanistan. So numbers have been really plummeting in his case. To some extent, that could also be true of President Xi Jinping. You have been looking at reports of energy shortages, property crisis, and of course his very critical time of seeking his 3rd term as Secretary General, General Secretary of CPC, and then of course President. So I think it was primarily driven by their domestic and to some extent a message to their friends and allies. So fundamentally what has come out is that they have kind of paid lip service to usual things, to just put them on the table without actually meaning much about them. But fundamentally a sense that this mutually hurting stalemate of last almost 5 years now of technology, trade wars, and all kind of other tensions which recently saw President Xi Jinping not appearing either in Rome G20 meeting or in climate change meeting, which would have given some chance to President Joe Biden to have some kind of either body language, if not a direct conversation. And therefore, this meeting became suddenly so much more important to make sure that they are seen talking together. The only message that comes out very clearly is that both have kind of indicated that they don't want to see their competition veering into some kind of conflict. That, I think, is a concrete message that they have tried to give out. Otherwise, I think it was just a setting of stage, I will say, from where maybe they have had two phone conversations before.
That's right.
But this kind of a 3.5 hours, as Ramesh, you just mentioned, meeting is more or less, I think, kind of gauging each other and setting the stage, in which case I think President Xi Jinping has come out with a stronger light if you look at the domestic constituencies being what they are addressing. But it's a good opening for President Joe Biden also.
Sure. Professor Singh, you've covered a lot of ground in your opening intervention there, but I want to focus a bit more on the optics and outcomes, if any, from this summit. Now, in your estimation, does the summit bode well for the world, or do you think the US-China tensions will persist for the immediate future?
I think it's definitely a step forward, but it's not a kind of a game-changing meeting, because it fundamentally takes forward what President Joe Biden stands for, which is fundamentally to continue with the policies of President Donald Trump, which means the competition between the United States and China is not disappearing, but it's going to be handled a little more in a subtle fashion, in a more finesse in terms of interacting with each other. And that is a continuation of Joe Biden repeatedly saying America is back, and therefore giving certain reassurance to its allies and friends that that kind of continuous sort of trade and technology war between the United States is not going to be really sort of hurting much of the global geopolitics, and therefore they have started some conversation. But as I say, this is kind of primarily addressing their domestic constituencies, their own personality projections as being in responsible state of mind and willing to engage each other to some extent. Nothing more than that. I think it's kind of a first step, as I would say. Sure. But definitely, it does carry a symbolism in that sense that both have begun to realize that it makes sense to begin to talk to each other, even if they have enormous number of sort of tensions, differences. If you heard the President Joe Biden speech at climate change summit also, in that case, President Joe Biden has been fairly, shall we say, firm and strong in terms of criticizing China on various occasions, on various issues. But when they met, you saw the unusual effort to show that bonhomie between two of them. And therefore, I think basically setting the stage effort on both sides, but much more on the side of President Joe Biden to set the stage as if we are sort of beginning to talk to each other, and things might move in a direction where the tension would not be hurting either the bilateral relationship and the fact that they are the largest and second largest economy. As we begin to talk of post-pandemic resilience of global economy, they're talking to each other, possibly sends a good signal to markets, to politicians in other countries that there is going to be perhaps hope of economic resurgence, resilience, where these two economies are not constantly undercutting each other. And so many issues. For example, Chinese had made promise of buying $200 billion of goods to bring little more balance in US-China trade. That hasn't happened so far. Even when Chinese claim that they have had a positive growth, I mean, they have hit their economy, as they claim, 100 trillion yuan, which is about $16 trillion. But they could have done that in purchasing more products from America to give them reassurance. And Joe Biden repeatedly underlines how industries and workforce is under sort of danger because of Chinese trade becoming one-sided increasingly, and has taken measures on that issue also. So I think it's basically confidence building kind of an exercise, a good beginning, I would say.
Professor Singh, you spoke about messaging or signaling to other countries, and that gives me a perfect segue to my next question to you. What's in it for India? How should India read the just concluded Xi-Biden summit?
That's an excellent question, Ramesh. I think that is something that all of us should be carefully sort of analyzing, because the fact that the United States so suddenly left Afghanistan, and that had sent some kind of sort of question marks as to whether India should depend on the United States and how much India should depend on the United States. And now this opening of dialogue with the Chinese president, you can recall that way back when India had conducted the nuclear tests in 1998, President Bill Clinton had come to Beijing and signed a joint statement that how China and the United States will manage South Asian security together, and that had upset so many people in India. So this kind of warming up with China does have some implications for India-United States relations, because after all, every country, is driven primarily by their own national interest. So in that sense, the fact that during President Donald Trump's time, there was enormous tension between China and the United States, that had definitely contributed to how United States felt increasingly inclined to cultivate and engage India at a very rapid pace. So it could be that if United States, China begin to sort of hold hands and work together, this could have then therefore some implications for India-United States relationship. But that is not to say that India-United States relationship is entirely dependent on how US treats China. To some extent that has some influence, but there is also enormous amount of autonomy that India-United States relationship has had. There is a bipartisan support, there are foundational agreements, whole lot of things that India and United States have gone together, largest trading partner. In that sense, there is a lot of autonomy in that relationship, but one cannot overlook the fact that there could be an influence if United States starts coming sort of closer and building partnerships with the Chinese. It could have something to India to reckon with, to be noticing those things in terms of how they will then take forward India-United States relationship.
Professor Singh, I'll come to the 3 T's, as some people call it, Taiwan, trade and technology momentarily. But on a related issue in terms of security in the wider Indo-Pacific region where India is invested heavily, how do you look at the so-called new arms race? We've seen China conduct a number of tests, including a hypersonic missile test. There's an arms race shaping in the Indo-Pacific region. Their nuclear technology as well. So how should India be actually be worried about the Chinese the trajectory on these issues?
China definitely has put enormous focus on their indigenous military modernization, whether it is electromagnetic spectrum, or it is AI, or it is let's say several other equipment like stealth aircraft. You mentioned of hypersonic missiles. There was a whole lot of reports from the United States of China actually expanding silos and stockpiles of its ballistic missiles. Actually, ICBMs were suspected. So yes, China has focused enormously on modernizing of its armed forces.
Right.
They have clearly put a date on 2035 when they want to make People's Liberation Army a world-class force which should not only fight but win wars. They are already constructing the 4th aircraft carrier, no doubt on that. But I must also underline their competition primarily is with United States, and United States has really pivoted towards Asia Pacific region, as you just mentioned, Ramesh. And the gap between United States and China is really enormous. And when you put United States along with its friends and allies, then the gap really increases far too much. So I don't see China beginning to threaten United States and friends and allies in Indo-Pacific region. But yes, the modernization does have certain impact on how equations are handled at the local level.
Professor Singh, one last question very quickly if you don't mind. I want you to take a step back and look at these 2 personalities, Xi Jinping and Joe Biden. Now, Biden came into this summit riding on the back of a $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill which was passed by both houses, by both parties in the legislature. On the other hand, Xi Jinping has just been, the Communist Party just passed a resolution in his name, only the 3rd time in Chinese history. How do you look at these 2 personalities? Can they do business together? Can they work together going forward?
Ramesh, I think they don't have much option about it because definitely Joe Biden is elected for 4 years. He's going to be in office for 4 years. President Xi Jinping, as you just mentioned, is kind of all set to take his 3rd term in office. So he's going to also continue. These are the largest economies, increasingly even largest military powers. So they will have to deal with each other. There is no choice they have about it. Except that there is also a bit of increasingly focus on nationalism, if not jingoism in case of China. And this whole sense of rejuvenation of nation and the kind of benchmarks that Xi Jinping has to reinforce is being almost inevitable, and no one but Xi Jinping choice for the Chinese in that sense, which is not the case for Joe Biden. I'm sure they will have their own next election on time, and in that sense, I think the pressure to showcase kind of grandstanding vis-a-vis United States in that sense becomes much more on President Xi Jinping. And therefore, you will notice that increasingly US will continue to be doing what President Joe Biden has been trying to put more subtle diplomacy of incremental change to be achieved in bilateral relationships, whereas Chinese would be looking at showcasing something which is really glaring and sharp, and you have to read, for example, editorials in Global Times, and the language they are using is very different. So I think it's going to be China acting a little more tough, and the United States trying to manage them as really sort of well in terms of optics, but in reality, of course, on the ground, United States remains far ahead and far more capable, particularly with the whole set of friends and allies that it has. So India being closer to United States will continuously be of enormous advantage India in that sense in dealing with China.
Right. On that note, Professor Singh, thank you for making time for us here at DD India. Appreciate it. Right. And talking about the U.S., President Joe Biden has signed into law the biggest U.S. infrastructure revamp in more than half a century at a rare bipartisan celebration in the White House on Monday. The $1.2 trillion package will fix bridges and roads, replace water pipes, build an electric vehicle charging network, and expand broadband internet. It is the most significant government investment of the kind since the creation of the National Highways Network in the 1950s.
It was major legislative achievement for Biden administration. United States President Joe Biden signed into law a spending bill. This infrastructure bill will help in repairing the nation's aging roads and bridges, upgrade the electrical grid, and expand access to broadband internet. This legislation is the largest federal investment in infrastructure in more than a decade. President Joe Biden signed a $1 trillion infrastructure bill on November 15th at a ceremony that drew Democrats and some Republicans who were instrumental in getting the legislation passed. The measure is expected to create jobs across the country by dispersing billions of dollars to state and local governments.
I ran for president believing it was time to rebuild the backbone of this nation, which I characterize as working people in the middle class. They're the ones who built the country. And to rebuild the economy from the bottom up and the middle out. This law delivers on that long overdue promise, in my view. It creates better jobs for millions of Americans.
The bill signing ceremony held in chilly weather on the White House South Lawn to accommodate a big crowd was an increasingly rare moment when members of both parties were willing to stand together and celebrate a bipartisan achievement. President Joe Biden has named former New Orleans Mayor Mitch Landrieu to supervise the $1 trillion infrastructure plan. Landrieu, also a Democratic former Louisiana Lieutenant Governor, led New Orleans from 2010 to 2018. He played an important role in helping the city rebound from devastating Hurricane Katrina in 2005. The House of Representatives passed the $1 trillion package of highway, broadband and other infrastructure improvements earlier this month. It was passed by the Senate in August. World Today Desk, DD India.
Now, in another story we are tracking here on World Today, thousands of migrants from West Asia are living in freezing conditions at the border between Belarus and the EU states of Poland and Lithuania. Now, both Poland and Lithuania refuse to let them enter. They accuse Belarus of illegally pushing migrants into the EU. At least 8 migrants have died along the 200-kilometer-long land border between Poland and Belarus due to cold and exhaustion. Now, EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell says the bloc will slap new sanctions on Belarus over the migrant crisis.
These are the visuals of migrants spending the night near the Belarus-Poland border in freezing conditions crossing the Grodno region. Their hopes are dying down, their cries falling on deaf ears. These migrants stopped near the Polish side of the border at the checkpoint, setting up a tent camp. Polish forces used water cannons against the migrants on the Belarus border. The European Union foreign ministers have reached an agreement on Monday on the fifth round of sanctions in Belarus's migrant crisis. The sanctions will target people, airlines, travel agencies and everyone involved in the illegal push of migrants. After meeting his EU counterparts in Brussels, EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell told reporters that the measures will affect individuals and companies and be finalized in the coming days. Meanwhile, the presidents of the three Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia, held a meeting with Polish President Andrzej Duda on Monday via video link. In a joint statement, they said that Belarus is forcing migrants to breach its borders with the European Union, and the government of President Alexander Lukashenko must be held accountable for human trafficking. Belarus's border committee released on Monday footage of a large group of migrants attempting to enter Polish territory. Migrants, mostly from Iraq and Afghanistan, began appearing on Belarus's land borders with the EU this year. They are trying to cross into the EU member states, Lithuania, Latvia and Poland via routes not used before. The European Union has accused Lukashenko of orchestrating an influx of migrants to EU members, Poland, Lithuania and Latvia, to pressure the EU to back down over sanctions slapped on his government. Belarus has repeatedly denied the accusation. World Today Desk, DD India.
6 teenagers were wounded on Monday in a drive-by shooting near their high school in the town of Aurora in the U.S. state of Colorado. Authorities were searching for multiple suspects in an attack which investigators believe may have been gang-related. All 6 victims, ranging in age from 14 to 18, are expected to recover from injuries described as non-life-threatening, although one youth was undergoing surgery. Aurora, a city of less than 400,000 people, was the scene of one of the bloodiest episodes of modern U.S. gun violence in 2012. A movie theater shooting took 12 lives and wounded dozens during a midnight premiere of the Batman film The Dark Knight Rises. Right, in more news from India now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has unveiled a statue of the Iron Man of India, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, on the occasion of India's first Audit Day that marks the historic origin of the institution of Comptroller and Auditor General from the CAG office premises in New Delhi. He also paid tributes to Mahatma Gandhi and Dr. B.R. Ambedkar at the premises. Addressing the event, Prime Minister Modi called for a recognition and celebration of the significant contributions by Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, Dr. Ambedkar and Mahatma Gandhi. Prime Minister said that the CAG is a heritage and every generation should cherish it.
ज्यादातर इंस्टीट्यूशन जन्म लेते हैं 3 दशक 4 दशक 5 दशक आते आते ही स्थितियां इतनी बदल जाती हैं कि वो कभी कभी अपना रिलेवेंस खो देते हैं। लेकिन सीएजी के संबंध में हम कह सकते हैं कि इतने सालों के बाद ये इंस्टीट्यूट अपने आप में एक बहुत बड़ी विरासत है, बहुत बड़ी अमानत है और हर पीढ़ी को उसे संभालना, उसे संवारना, उसके सजाना और आने वाली पीढ़ियों के लिए और अधिक उपयुक्त बना करके उसको संक्रमित करना, ट्रांसफर करना, मैं समझता हूं ये बहुत बड़ी जिम्मेवारी भी है।
Prime Minister Modi highlighted the importance of the CAG. He said that CAG is an institution that's evolved with time and its timeless contribution has created a hallmark in Indian finance and governance. He also said that our history will also be seen and understood through data. In the future, data will be dictating history.
साथियों, पुराने समय में इंफॉर्मेशन, स्टोरीज के लिए प्रसारित होती थी। कहानियों के जरिए ही इतिहास लिखा जाता था। लेकिन आज 21वीं सदी में डेटा ही इंफॉर्मेशन है और आने वाले समय में हमारी हिस्ट्री भी डेटा के जरिए देखी और समझी जाएगी। In future, data will be dictating the history.
Focusing on importance of financial audits, the Prime Minister said government along with the CAG has redefined the approach and has offered an expert view to introduce systematic improvements for the government. He said audit is considered an important part of value addition.
साथियों, एक समय था जब देश में ऑडिट को एक आशंका, एक भय के साथ देखा जाता था। सीएजी बनाम सरकार, ये हमारी व्यवस्था की एक सामान्य सोच बन गई थी। लेकिन आज इस मानसिकता को बदला गया है। आज ऑडिट को वैल्यू एडिशन का अहम हिस्सा माना जा रहा है।
Now, Prime Minister Modi touched down on Indian Air Force's C-130J Hercules transport aircraft on a 6-lane Purvanchal Expressway to mark the momentous inauguration. He also witnessed a magnificent air show with fighter and transport aircraft making multiple takeoffs and landings at the emergency airstrip. The Mirage 2000 fighter jet Sukhoi 30, the Jaguar AN-32 and Surya Kiran displayed majestic air maneuvers.
Indian Air Force's C-130J Hercules transport aircraft touching down on the Purvanchal Expressway. It taxied down the 340-kilometer long 6-lane expressway with Prime Minister Narendra Modi on board the aircraft. This 3.2-kilometer long airstrip on the expressway will enable landing and takeoff of Indian Air Force fighter planes in case of emergency. The touchdown on the expressway turned tarmac marked the momentous inauguration of the expressway. Prime Minister Narendra Modi had laid the foundation stone for the Purvanchal Expressway in 2018. Prime Minister also witnessed a magnificent air show with fighter and transport aircrafts making multiple takeoffs and landings at the emergency airstrip. Mirage 2000 was the first to touch down.
Mirage 2000.
It made a pit stop for a mock drill in refueling and emergency servicing. Next was a Russian-made twin-engine AN-32 transport aircraft.
आप देखेंगे AN-32 के पीछे का रैंप खुलेगा और
on board were guard commandos and snipers who executed a cordon-off exercise. All eyes were skyward with the Mirage 2000 zooming down on the expressway tarmac.
सज्जनों, ये था Mirage 2000.
Flying at a speed of 350 kilometers per hour, the Jaguar ground attack aircraft that has been modernized by the Indian Air Force also touched down as the Prime Minister looked on. Next were the Sukhoi 30 fighter jets that performed mesmerizing air acrobatics.
Out a series of rolls as it fly past you.
The Sukhoi 30s in tandem with Surya Kiran, the Indian Air Force's acrobatic display team, also put on a colourful show to remember.
दो अंगरख आकाश में Sukhoi 30 जहाज Sukhoi 30 में आज उड़ान भर रहे हैं जांबाज पायलट विंग कमांडर चहल और फ्लाइट लेफ्टिनेंट जयवीर
The culmination was marked by the C-130J taxiing in to fly out the Prime Minister to home base. With Ashwini Mishra, Bureau Report, DD India.
Well, let's get you some more world news now. The COVID pandemic continues to batter Russia, with the country reporting a bulk of daily cases and deaths due to the disease. Most of Russia's 80-plus regions lifted a week-long workplace shutdown at the beginning of last week. The lockdown was designed to curb a surge in new infections. Several parts of Russia have removed the workplace shutdown measure. The country has mandated people visiting cafes, restaurants or shopping centers to prove they have been vaccinated or previously had the virus by presenting a QR code on their mobile phone. Russia has so far reported nearly 9.2 million cases of COVID-19. The death toll has crossed 256,000. To Cuba now. Cuba has eased COVID restrictions 2 years after the start of the pandemic. It's reported a dip in the number of COVID-19 cases and deaths. Cuba reopened schools and its borders to international tourists. Travelers over 12 years old will only need to carry proof of vaccination or recent PCR test to enter the country. Cuba has vaccinated 65% of its population. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson has called on the need to modulate the definition of fully vaccinated in a bid to include COVID-19 booster shots. He hinted that the UK may add booster dose to the National Health Service COVID-19 travel pass, although he did not give a time frame.
Plans to add the booster dose to the NHS COVID travel pass, but again, I think what the general lesson is from anybody who wants to travel, you can see that getting fully vaccinated with a booster is going to be something that will, on the whole, make your life easier in all kinds of ways, including for foreign travel. So I would just say, you know, if you're thinking about that this is yet another reason to get it done.
Right. In the European Union, German Chancellor Angela Merkel said the world needs to be better prepared to probe the origins of pandemics. She made the comment at a summit organized by the World Health Organization on lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic. She voiced her support for more reliable financing by the WHO. Meanwhile, Austria enforced a lockdown for the unvaccinated to counter a surge in the number of cases. It's deployed police to ensure adherence to the lockdown. The landlocked Central European country has vaccinated around 65% of its population. Austria has over 971,000 cases of the disease, with the fatalities crossing the 11,700 mark. In Greece's capital, Athens, medics held a sit-in on Monday for demanding a pay hike and better working conditions as COVID cases soar across the country, overflooding hospitals with patients. The workers said they are underpaid, overworked and understaffed in the midst of the pandemic. They called for more hiring and for the government to include them on a list of hazardous professions which receive hazard pay benefits. Greece made vaccination mandatory for nursing home staff in July and healthcare workers in September. Greece's COVID-19 cases have passed the 838,000 mark with over 16,800 fatalities. Right, here are some snippets in our News at Glance segment. Take a look.
Ecuador's President Guillermo Lasso has appointed a new head of the Joint Command of the Armed Forces after the former chief resigned following a prison riot that left dozens of inmates dead in the country. Fighting between criminal groups within Penitenciaria del Litoral prison broke out over the weekend, resulting in 68 prisoners killed and 25 injured according to the government. United Nations has announced that it has allocated $25 million from the Central Emergency Response Fund for humanitarian assistance and protection of civilians in Ethiopia. The UN spokesperson said that a further $15 million has been allocated from the Ethiopian Humanitarian Fund. The funds are expected to help aid agencies provide protection and other assistance to people affected by the conflict in Tigray, Amhara and Afar. Agencies will also extend support to drought-affected Somali and Oromia regions by providing drinking water. However, the UN says that Ethiopia still faces a funding gap of $1.3 million, including $350 million for the response in Tigray, the epicenter of the Ethiopian conflict. Indian Foreign Service Officer Vinay Kumar has been appointed as the next ambassador of India to Republic of the Union of Myanmar. An IFS officer of the 1992 batch, Vinay Kumar is presently an additional secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs. World Today Desk, DD India.
Right to cricket now. Rohit Sharma is set to take charge as India's T20 captain following Virat Kohli stepping down from the captaincy in the shortest format of the game. Not only this, outgoing head coach Ravi Shastri will be replaced by Rahul Dravid. So under the leadership of Rahul Dravid and Rohit Sharma, Team India has begun training in Jaipur for the first T20 international against New Zealand on 17th November.
Rohit Sharma will lead India in their first T20 international series following Virat Kohli stepping down from the captaincy in the shortest format. Kohli and outgoing head coach Ravi Shastri have endorsed Rohit's candidature for the T20 international captaincy, but it's not yet known if he's been given the role permanently. KL Rahul has been named Rohit's deputy. The squad is without a number of first-choice players, among whom are Kohli, Jasprit Bumrah, Ravindra Jadeja and Mohammad Shami. All four have been on the road virtually non-stop since the start of India's tour of England, which began with the World Test Championship final in June, which was followed then by the IPL and then the T20 Cricket World Cup, which India exited at the Super 12 stage. The all-rounder Hardik Pandya and the fast bowler Shardul Thakur are also absent from the squad. There are four new or virtually new faces in the squad. The opening batter Ruturaj Gaikwad, who was the leading run-getter in IPL 2021, made his T20 international debut when he was part of a second-string India squad that toured Sri Lanka in July. The all-rounder Venkatesh Iyer and fast bowlers Harshal Patel and Avesh Khan, however, are yet to play for India. The India squad for the T20 series against New Zealand is like this: Rohit Sharma as the captain, KL Rahul as the vice-captain, Ruturaj Gaikwad, Shreyas Iyer, Suryakumar Yadav, Rishabh Pant, Ishan Kishan, Venkatesh Iyer, Yuzvendra Chahal, R. Ashwin, Aksar Patel, Avesh Khan, Bhuvneshwar Kumar, Deepak Chahar, Harshal Patel and Mohammad Siraj. The series will be first won under the charge of new Indian coach Rahul Dravid. The BCCI also announced the India A team that will be touring South Africa for the 4-day matches starting November 23rd. Opener Prithvi Shaw and fast bowler Umran Malik are part of this team. Sports Desk, DD India.
Now, coach Rahul Dravid and T20I captain Rohit Sharma addressed the media through a virtual press conference ahead of the first match of the series that starts in Jaipur on Wednesday. Now, this was the first time Rahul Dravid spoke at a press conference after replacing Ravi Shastri as the coach of Indian cricket team. Apart from giving his vision of Team India going forward, Dravid also spoke about maintaining the workload management of the team in these difficult times.
Even in terms of the bubble fatigue or the situation we are in now, we will think about the players' long-term careers and futures as well, and keep that in mind and not prioritize that their well-being at any stage over sort of short-term results. So it's a combination of both. In any situation, yes, you have to have a combination of both. You have to win now, but you also have to keep one eye to the future. You have to plan and prepare for you spoke about the big tournaments. We have them coming up, in the next couple of years, and we have to think about those things as well. So, yeah, it's a balance that you need to strike, and that's happens in the sort of day-to-day function. It's hard to sort of put down how exactly you will do it, but yeah, we'll put things in mind, and certainly one of the goals is it'll never go away. I mean, the thinking long-term about what's in the future certainly is my job as a coach, and that won't change irrespective of whichever team you're kind of coaching.
And both Rohit Sharma and Rahul Dravid spoke about the need for following their own template for T20Is and not looking at what other teams are doing. Dravid also made it very clear that there was no need for separate teams for separate formats.
Certainly looking at the players' health and well-being, and because I know that if we get that piece right, we get the schedule right. When we get all our good players on the park and fully fit and ready to go, I think we'll be a very formidable team in any of the formats.
And talking about the New Zealand team, Rahul Dravid said that they are an exceptional side. They are strong and have good depth. Over the years, they have played well as a team.
Honestly, I think the narrative has certainly changed over the last few years. They probably enter every tournament. I'm sure maybe from an outside perspective, they'll be underdogs, but I'm sure internally teams that compete against them know that they're always going to be one of the top contenders in any tournament that they play in. So, yeah, they're a very good team. They're well led, they're well planned, they're well prepared, and yes, they have beaten India recently in a few tournaments. Those are the facts. And herein lies a really good opportunity for us to keep improving and keep getting better. And hopefully, the next time we get an opportunity in a big tournament against them, we put one over them.
And Rohit Sharma says the team is not just keeping an eye on one or two individuals, whatever is required of them to be a successful team.
India has been brilliant in this particular format. It's just that, we haven't won the ICC tournament, but we've played well as a team and we've performed well as a team. Of course, there are little holes that we need to fill up and make sure that we've been looked after. That will be the biggest challenge that we'll have as a team to do that. There are holes in every team, but it's just that you try and maximize that, the better for you. So I'm not gonna say that we want to follow certain teams' template. We just have to follow and create our own template and what is best for our team and what is right for our team.
In more sports news, Union Sports Minister Anurag Singh Thakur and Minister of State for Sports Nishit Pramanik conferred the Arjuna Award on Tokyo Olympian Bhavani Devi at a special event held in New Delhi on Monday. Bhavani Devi, who is the first Indian to represent the country in fencing, has been conferred the Arjuna Award for the year 2020 for an exemplary contribution to the sport. The National Sports Awards this year were conferred by the President of India on 13th November. But Bhavani Devi was not able to attend the ceremony as she was participating in a competition in France. She returned on Monday and called on Minister Thakur who conferred the award on her. On to tennis now. Novak Djokovic received the year-end ATP Tour #1 ranking trophy for a record 7th time after starting his ATP Finals campaign in Turin with a win. The world #1 better the mark set by 14 times Grand Slam champion Pete Sampras, who ended the year on top of the rankings from 1993 to 1998. Earlier, the Serbian began his quest for a 6th title at the season-ending ATP Finals with a 7-6, 6-2 win over Norway's Casper Ruud. Let's talk about hockey next. The SAIL Hockey Academy Odisha lifted the title in the 5th SNBP All India Hockey Tournament Boys Under-16 tournament at Shivaji Chhatrapati Sports Complex on Monday. In the final, the Odisha team dominated the proceedings before beating HAR Hockey Academy Sonepat 2-0. Earlier, the host SNBP Academy bagged the 3rd place with a brilliant sign-off performance, beating Regional Development Centre Jharkhand 6-1.
The All India Hockey Tournament men's final saw the Odisha team dominate proceedings before defeating HAR Hockey Academy Sonipat 2-0. The winners netted the first goal through a brilliant finish by Ritik Kujur in the first half. After the changeover, Mukesh Tete did well to convert a penalty corner to make it 2-0 for the Odisha team. SAIL Hockey Academy thus won the title 2-0, and the awards were given by former hockey legend Dhanraj Pillai, who felt that hockey had a great talent pool in the western state.
महाराष्ट्र के जितने भी सीनियर प्लेयर्स हैं साथ में मिल के अगर हम काम करेंगे तो आने वाले समय में हमारे महाराष्ट्र से अपने देश के लिए रिप्रेजेंट करने वाले प्लेयर भी बन सकते हैं.
Many traditional sports in India need nurturing, and catch them young is the mantra to help Indian sports find new talents from such tournaments.
Traditional sports like kabaddi, handball, women's football, weightlifting have lagged behind in India. We plan to start a sports academy and stadium from next year onwards to help sports in the state gain glory.
Dhyan Chand's son and hockey legend Ashok Kumar visited the inauguration and felt that such tournaments are the need of the hour for helping Indian hockey scale new heights.
Dr. भोसले जी की फैमिली जो हॉकी के लिए कर रही है, मैं वाकई में अप्रिशिएट करता हूं उस बात को, और ऐसे व्यक्तित्व को जिन्होंने हॉकी के लिए एक बहुत बड़ा योगदान दिया है. ये कोई छोटा काम नहीं है, बहुत बड़ा काम है. हमें ऐसे लोगों को आगे करना है, आगे करना चाहिए, दिल से करना चाहिए.
Earlier, host SNBP Academy backed the third place with a brilliant sign-off performance, beating Regional Development Center Jharkhand 6-1. Desk, DD India.
And Guan Yu Zhao will become China's first full-time F1 driver when he makes his debut with Alfa Romeo alongside Valtteri Bottas in 2022. The 22-year-old has had extensive testing in older F1 machinery through his role as test driver for Alpine. He's been linked with a move to F1 with Alfa Romeo for several months now and was given the nod ahead of incumbent Antonio Giovinazzi, who the team announced was leaving earlier on Tuesday. It comes after he became only the second driver from mainland China to have turned a wheel in a practice session during a Grand Prix weekend earlier this year when he drove his hero Fernando Alonso's Alpine in Austria. Right, take a look now at our Beyond Headlines segment.
The trio of little lionesses, Jamila, Kumani and Malaika, were presented to the public for the first time on Monday in Gelsenkirchen Zoo in Germany around 5 years after their birth. And the little ones are doing very well, say the zoo authorities. The triplets, whose names are all of African origin according to the zoo, saw the light of day on October 8. Her mother is Lioness Fiona. 2 years ago, she and her sister Lissy came to Gelsenkirchen from the Swedish zoo in Kolmården. A Mark Rothko painting has been sold for $82.5 million at auction, the second highest price for a work by the late abstract artist. Titled Number 7, the 241 centimeters high canvas painted in 1951 in bands of green, crimson and lavender was expected to sell for $70 million to $90 million at Sotheby's in New York. It was the first time the painting had come to auction. The identity of the buyer was not known, but it provoked fierce phone bidding from the people representing Asian clients. Other works sold on Monday included the 1947 sculpture Linus by Swiss artist Alberto Giacometti, the world's most expensive sculptor. It fetched $78.4 million on Monday, below the $141.3 million record for any sculpture that was set in 2015 for Giacometti's Lee Homadoi. Over 900 items from some of the world's biggest music stars are hitting the auction block in New York. Julien's Auction is hosting the annual Icons and Idols Rock and Roll Auction live at the Hard Rock Cafe on November 19th and 20th. The top lot is an Eric Clapton staged used guitar from the 1970s. Several items from the rock band Nirvana and lead Kurt Cobain are also included in the sale. Dresses worn by Amy Winehouse, Katy Perry and jewelry from Elvis Presley are also up for grabs. Sharpshooters gathered on the shores of Lake Lucerne this week to live out the Swiss tradition of marksmanship on the hallowed ground where the country was founded. The annual Ridley shooting event was organized to mark the event. This year's competition drew more than 1,000 shooters from across Switzerland, cheered on by hundreds of guests. Informal shooting competitions began there around 1861, and an official club founded in 1874 still runs the contest, which had to be cancelled in 2020 due to the COVID pandemic. In South Korea, flocks of hooded cranes numbering over 1,000 used to create a spectacle at Hapyeong wetland every autumn, but not a single crane can be found there anymore. More than 2,000 hooded cranes visited the wetland back in 2014, but the number shrank to about 100 by 2019 and none was sighted last year. The sandy banks of Hepyong wetland were flooded, forcing the birds on their way to Japan to divert to the west coast. Environmentalists say that in order to bring back hooded cranes, the sluice gates of Chilgok Dam should be opened wide to create a huge sandbar. A floating teleworking office was set up for one day on Japan's largest lake in the western prefecture of Shiga. The temporary office on Lake Biwa was organized by Shiga Prefecture Industrial Support Center, which helps small businesses in the region. The event was a part of a trial to find new teleworking environments amidst the COVID pandemic. The office was set up on a cargo barge measuring about 200 square meters, equipped with desks, chairs, and free Wi-Fi. It also had a cafe that served coffee. About 10 self-employed people made advance applications to use the office. They checked documents and held business negotiations on board as a fresh breeze was blowing. World Today Desk, DD India.
Finally, it's time for our Today in History segment, in which we look at some events that have made news on this day in the past.
On this day in 1933, the United States and the Soviet Union established diplomatic relations. On this day in 1959, the Rodgers and Hammerstein musical The Sound of Music premiered in New York, starring Mary Martin. In 1960, on this day, Clark Gable, American film actor, died aged 59. Best known for his portrayal of Rhett Butler in Gone with the Wind, he had just finished filming The Misfits with Marilyn Monroe. In 2010, on this day, Britain's Prince William and fiancée Kate Middleton attended official engagement photo call at St James's Palace in London. On this day in 2013, Sachin Tendulkar played 200th and the final test. Actress Angelina Jolie also received Jean Hersholt Humanitarian Award on this day in 2013. On this day in 2016, world's largest collection of model cars and dioramas certified in Beirut. World Today Desk, DD India.
With that, it's a wrap, but news continues here on DD India. You can catch all the latest updates on our social media, mobile and digital platforms. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.